As the sole survivor of Vault 111 enters the Goodneighbor nightclub, the third rail for the first time, they can bear witness to the attempted intimidation of a young but hardened mercenary by a pair of his former colleagues. These killers for hire, Winlock and Barnes, are members of the Gunners, the most powerful and feared outfit of mercenaries in the Commonwealth. Having delivered their warning with a demand that he stop taking jobs in their territory, they leave, giving the sole survivor the opportunity to hire this man as a traveling companion. I'm the Resolute Cartographer, and this is the story of that mercenary, Robert MacCready. While that interaction between the sole survivor and MacCready takes place in the post-apocalyptic Boston of 2287, the story truly begins over a decade prior in a cave on the outskirts of the radioactive ruins of Washington, D.C. Orphaned as a young child, Robert Joseph MacCready arrived in Lamplight Caverns, never having known his parents. In the almost 200 years since the atomic war that destroyed the world, these caverns had been host to a society composed entirely of children. This state of affairs had been maintained by a strict rule that forced the eviction of inhabitants on their 16th birthday. The only replenishment would come from newly abandoned and orphaned children being brought to or finding their way into the caves. Safely concealed beneath the stone, these children organized themselves into a functional society with guards, scavengers, teachers, medics, and a self-elected leader they called the mayor. In 2274, a 9-year-old named Angela decided that she would be mayor, but she told the rest of the Lamplighters that the title should be changed to princess. In response, 9-year-old Robert MacCready punched her in the nose, declaring that they needed a protector, not someone to rule over them. Mayor MacCready, as he was known, would serve as their leader and the guard of the front gate of Little Lamplight over the next few years. In 2277, Mayor MacCready met the lone wanderer of Vault 101 when the former vault dweller arrived to search the caverns. Foul-mouthed and furious, MacCready ordered the lone wanderer to leave. At 18 years old, the lone wanderer was too old to enter the settlement, and MacCready didn't trust adults, or mungos as the Lamplighters called them. The lone wanderer didn't have another option though. Lamplight Caverns concealed the back door of Vault 87, and the front door was not an option. In order to facilitate entry, the lone wanderer worked out a deal with Mayor MacCready. They would return children captured by the slavers of Paradise Falls in exchange for entry into their town. He agreed, and soon the children were returned home safe. The lone wanderer passed through their caverns, and soon the capital Wasteland had a source of fresh, clean water for any and all. But that is a story for another time. After another few years passed, the time had arrived for 16-year-old Robert MacCready to leave his home behind and make his way in the world. Having become an excellent shot with a rifle as a gate guard in Little Lamplight, MacCready wandered the wastes as a hired sharpshooter. He did well for himself, taking down targets from range, trying to avoid risking his own life. As he wandered, he met a woman named Lucy and fell in love. He didn't want to tell her that he made his living as a hitman, so he lied and told her that he was a soldier. They made a life together, and Lucy gave birth to a son, Duncan. Sadly, Robert and Duncan lost Lucy when Duncan was just a small child. Robert and Lucy decided to spend a night in an old metro station, not realizing that it was infested with feral ghouls. The ghouls were ripping her apart before Robert even knew they were there. He scooped up Duncan and ran. Now widowed, Robert MacCready settled on a farm to live a quiet life with his son. Unfortunately, this was not to be. Duncan fell ill one day, his body covered with blue boils. MacCready sought the help of every doctor he could to no avail. As his son grew progressively weaker, hope seemed to be running out. MacCready ranged out far and wide seeking medical care. The search finally bore fruit when he reached the Commonwealth. It was there that MacCready met a man by the name of Sinclair. In the course of a conversation, unprompted, Sinclair told MacCready of the death of his former partner to a disease that caused him to break out in blue boils. The two of them had found what they believed to be information that would lead them to a cure for the illness in the depths of an old biomedical research facility in Malden. Sadly, Sinclair's partner had passed before they could obtain it, but he had found security codes for the building, and he handed these over to MacCready when he requested them. MacCready made a beeline for MedTech only to find himself up against a vast mob of feral ghouls. Unable to reach the cure within, MacCready sought out help, or at least the resources to acquire it. In order to raise the necessary funds to hire backup, he joined the Gunner mercenaries, who, as luck would have it, were hiring sharpshooters at the time. He worked with the Gunners for a time, but it was rapidly becoming clear that they were not good people. They were out to finish any job, no matter the collateral damage or innocent deaths involved. While he wanted to do everything he could to save his son, he had also made a promise to clean up his act, and working with the Gunners was not the way to do that. MacCready left the Gunners and set up shop in Goodneighbor as an independent contractor. The Gunners didn't take kindly to this competition, which is why they'd turned up to threaten him just as the sole survivor of Vault 111 happened to arrive in the third rail. As MacCready's antagonists, Whitlock and Barnes, left the club, He offered his services to the sole survivor for the cost of 250 caps, and together they set out to tame the wastes. As the sole survivor and MacCready fought their battles together, a bond of trust began to form. What began as a business relationship soon became friendly. When he felt that he could trust the sole survivor, MacCready asked his employer for some assistance dealing with the constant threat posed by the gunners. Agreeing to help MacCready out, the sole survivor struck out for the Mass Pike interchange, chunks of elevated highway that the gunners Whitlock and Barnes called home. Following a raging battle that resulted in the death of MacCready's antagonists, he was out from under the threat posed by the gunners. While the sole survivor feared backlash from the mercs, MacCready explained that the gunners were a business that had just lost an entire outpost, and they wouldn't risk losing more men going after him. MacCready thanked the sole survivor and repaid his hiring fee, explaining that he didn't like feeling that the relationship was out of balance. Now traveling as friends, the sole survivor and MacCready continued to battle across the wastes, killing mutants, ghouls, and even more gunners as they went. Eventually, MacCready finally felt safe in asking for help with his biggest problem, retrieving the cure to his son's illness from the depths of medtech. Together, they set off for Malden, battling the ghouls that had driven MacCready off of his initial attempt. Using the password MacCready had obtained from Sinclair, they lifted the lockdown that had been in place for over 210 years and descended into the depths of the facility. After a pitched battle with dozens of feral ghouls, they finally found it. The cure for Duncan MacCready. Elated, MacCready explained to the sole survivor that all they had to do now was to return to Goodneighbor, from where he could ship the cure home to his son. With the passage of the cure back to the capital Wasteland secured via a reliable caravan, MacCready could finally relax a bit. And thanks for all the help the sole survivor had given him, MacCready gifted them with the most emotionally valuable item he had, a small wooden toy soldier. He explained that his wife Lucy had made it for him when they'd started seeing each other, and when he told her that he was a soldier. It had taken on even more significance when she passed. Though it was a constant reminder that he had lied to her, it was also an extremely meaningful gift for him to pass on to the sole survivor. MacCready would always view the sole survivor as one of his greatest friends. Alright, well that just about does it for the story of Robert MacCready, but I do have a few things I want to say before closing this out. First, MacCready's wife was named Lucy, and the name of the doctor in Little Lamplight in Fallout 3 was also Lucy. Though Lucy in Little Lamplight even saved MacCready when he was injured in a cave-in according to the game guide. This coincidence led me to believe that they might be the same Lucy, but I feel like this would be odd for him not to have mentioned growing up with her, so I don't think it's the case. I think it's more likely to be the case that the Lucy in Little Lamplight is a reference to Lucy in the comic Peanuts, who operates the psychiatric booth, given that they're both, quote, doctors, unquote. Second, the toy soldier that MacCready gives you when he idolizes you is counted as a junk item, so if it's important to you, pull it out of your inventory for safekeeping before depositing scrap. Third, MacCready has unique dialogue for many of the locations in Fallout 4, including referencing Three Dog at the local radio station, the Washington Monument in Bunker Hill, and his collection of Grognak the Barbarian comics in Hubris Comics. Fourth, a similar point to the last point, if you take MacCready to Trinity Cathedral and stand around idle, he'll find a pew, sit down, and pray. Fifth, I mentioned this to a minor extent in the narrative, but while foul-mouthed in Fallout 3, MacCready has given up cursing in Fallout 4. This is due to his commitment to his son Duncan to clean up his act. Sixth, I found it to be very strange that MacCready doesn't take the cure home to Duncan. He came to the Commonwealth to find a cure. He found it. Why doesn't he go home? I get that it would stink for gameplay reasons to lose a companion, but who among the player base wouldn't understand him going home to ensure his son's health? They could have even had it to where he leaves the game for 2 weeks to a month before returning with Duncan in tow. But they chose not to, and I can't say that I really understand that. Seventh, in relation to the last post, I wonder where MacCready left Duncan, and with whom. It could be that Duncan is in MacCready's old home of Little Lamplight, or with Red or Lucy in Big Town, should that town still exist. I wish we knew more about this. Eighth, I almost made a mistake in this section by listing a discrepancy that was far more severe than the discrepancy that caused me to almost make that said mistake. I know that was a little confusing, so let me explain here. The root of this lies in a misstatement by the Little Lamplighter Sticky when he says no one over 18 is allowed to stay in Little Lamplight. Because of this, I assumed for a time that everyone left Little Lamplight at 18, which clashed with MacCready's claim in Fallout 4 that everyone leaves at 16. I was about to list this as a discrepancy between Fallout 3 and Fallout 4, but I decided to dive a little deeper by checking in with the former Little Lamplighters in Big Town. Once I'd saved the people of Big Town from super mutants, I got confirmation that they'd left Little Lamplight at 16. Sticky's statement in Fallout 3 is wrong, not MacCready's statement in Fallout 4. I wanted to mention this as, in talking to Sticky, some of y'all might end up with the same confusion as I did. Ninth, a couple of notes on MacCready as a companion. Once you reach the state of MacCready idolizing you, you gain the perk Kill Shot, which gives you plus 20% to the probability of completing a headshot in VATS. Along with this, you can attempt to romance MacCready if you so choose. Personally, I went for Curie in that regard, but we'll talk more about her some other time. 10th, I just wanted to note that we've talked about medtech in Malden before in the video on the Turnquist family, in which I talked about Wayne Turnquist working at the medtech facility in Malden, narrowly escaping the lockdown that persisted until the arrival of the sole survivor in MacCready. Lastly, there are some parallels between the lives of MacCready and the sole survivor. Both lived underground most of their lives. Both had their spouses killed in front of them, and both are hunting the Commonwealth for a way to save their son, but they go about it in a very roundabout way. Just interesting things to consider. Alright, that should do it for Robert MacCready. If you want to receive notifications when I launch these lore videos, you can follow me on Twitter at GamingWithMaps. If you appreciate what I do here and you want to support the channel financially, you can become a patron with Patreon. I want to thank my patrons Mesothelioma, 76 of Texas, Jill AWS, Brian, and Dark Malcontent of Metaverse Studios for their support. This has been the Irresolute Cartographer. Thanks for watching. I'll see you again next time.